So my guest today is Olivia Mendoza. Olivia is a breathwork facilitator, a woman's circle holder, an intuitive artist, and a self-healer, and a very proud sober warrior. I met Olivia back in the fall of 2023 when we went to the same retreat in the south of England. And I remember not really like meeting Olivia the first day because she and I were sitting next to each other, and I could sense her aura, her vibe, but I actually heard her whimpering more than seeing, because the first session was at night and we were just starting to get to know each other. And then the moment, I don't know if I told you this, Olivia, the moment when I really started having connection with you was I was sitting across from you in the circle, and you were not doing anything, as in you weren't writing things down, you weren't even really participating. You were sort of sitting against the door. And
Mhm.
when it came your turn to say something, you said that you just were just enjoying being and sensing. And you didn't want, like intentionally, you didn't want to write or talk or do anything else, but just feel, and how you were really enjoying doing that. And for somebody like me who's constantly needing to do something like writing or talking, like just feeling productive, you looking like kind of unproductive was mind blowing. Okay. So that was my first impression of you. And then, and then we got to know each other better. Like we got to know everybody better. And then I got it, as in I got what you were doing. And I kind of strive for that now, to be able to not do and just be and just feel and sense. So listeners are probably like, what is she talking about? But to end my little story and have you come in, I am so happy to know you and to have you in my life and to share you with the Second Spring community. So welcome to the podcast and thank you for saying yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for asking me. Thank you.
It's a
Thank you, honey.
pleasure. So can you in your own way and in a maybe a more brief way than not share with us your journey of your life, and I know you're in your early 40s, so we'll consider you living that sort of midlife second spring chapter right now. So yeah, give us a little history of you and how you kind of got to be where you are today.
Oh, that's such a big question.
I know.
And you said brief. So let me see what I can do. So I grew up in London. I'm a Londoner, born and bred, born in 1980. And yeah, to the outside world, I had quite a privileged childhood. But behind closed doors, it was a very different story. So I grew up with a lot of emotional abuse. It was a very difficult childhood. I spent a lot of my early years dissociated, as my way of, it was my survival strategy. I was very in it, yeah. So my upbringing kind of turned a quite loud, colourful little girl into a very introverted, quiet little thing. Who I didn't really use my voice until I became a teenager and I found my voice and essentially moved from a place of being in freeze for a lot of my early years to fight.
Mm.
And I basically stayed in fight with quite a bit of flight as well for the next 20 years. And what that looked like for me was a lot of anger, a lot of rage, pretty much defined a large piece of my life. I was very angry, very rageful, very depressed as well. And at 16, I found my other coping strategies, which were drinking, and then a little later self-harming. And those things got me through. So I spent a decade and a half, I would say I was lost, very, very lost in addiction. University educated, got my psychology degree by some sort of miracle. I actually had to stop drinking in order to graduate. So I stopped drinking for 6 months because I was in such a mess that I wouldn't have been able to. Then utilized my psychology degree by becoming a bartender and waitress. So I did that for a few years. Eventually landed in Berlin. So I moved from London to Berlin, and it was just, yeah, a whirlwind of chaos and self-destruction in another country. So I ended up getting sober, and it was never part of the plan. It was never on my radar. I wasn't one of those people who thought that I needed to stop, because stopping wasn't an option. Like it was my coping mechanism. But one day I woke up, it was a real moment of clarity, and I ended up in the rooms of recovery, and I've been sober ever since. So I was 29. And so my work now is very much rooted in my own personal healing journey. And everything I've overcome and essentially recovered from. Like, I do feel that, I do see that. And yeah, so came back to England. First 10 years of my recovery, I was transformed from who I used to be, but something still felt very stuck. I was still quite depressed. And then I found breathwork, and it blew my heart wide open. It blew my mind wide open, and it shifted and continues to shift things for me on just this, yeah, beyond mind level, cellular, internal level. And it truly changed me. Like, it truly, truly changed me. I was talking to someone earlier about this, and essentially what it did and what I've learned is all the things I was reading about in books, all the things that spiritual teachers were telling me, all sounded like wonderful ideas. But until I'd actually truly, truly experienced it, it was kind of intellectual, cognitive, and maybe just it felt unattainable and ungraspable. And breathwork made it all my reality. So yeah, that's and then things have kind of, yeah, unfolded from that.
Amazing. Can we go back to the point where you woke up and decided that you needed to let go of your coping mechanism? I mean, that I don't have, I don't have personal experience with addiction, but what I have heard and seen is it's not an easy surrender. So how did it, were you thinking for a while, or was it truly like a light bulb or lightning bolt? Some people call it like a lightning bolt moment of like just 1 second and you're done with whatever was hurting you.
Um, Pretty much. I woke up, so I was, like I said, I was living in Berlin. I was at the time living in an apartment that belonged to a man that I'd met in a club.
The night before kind of thing.
And he had basically asked, pretty much, I'd met him in a club and moved in with him like the next day because that's what I did.
Yeah.
Um, he'd gone away. I think he'd gone away for the weekend and basically said, "You need to be gone when I'm back." So it was just, yeah, I woke up in this flat, and for the first time in my life, I knew I was done. I knew I was done. I was having what was probably a panic attack, but I didn't know what it was at the time. So I was hyperventilating. I felt, I mean, yeah, wretched to the bone. It was just hideous. And I was on my own in a foreign country and didn't really know anybody. I was scared. I was really scared, but it wasn't, yeah, like it wasn't a mental thing. It wasn't an intellectual thing. It was a very full body sense of, this is it, I'm done. And just the words, I'm done. And I remember probably emailing my sister at that time. It's before mobile phones or before, smartphones. And telling her, I remember saying to her, like, I only had a bottle of wine and some vodkas and some beers and some pills and some this and some that. That's all I had. And she was like, the fact that you just said only,
The red flag.
suggests maybe, yeah, maybe it's time. And she had tried to encourage me to get help before, but no one else saying anything to me had ever made a dent. And this is what we say: recovery has to come from within. So at that point, and this is, I love synchronicity. I love stories of synchronicity and like magical connections and interconnections of people. And I had met somebody like a few weeks prior who went to an English speaking fellowship in Germany. And had I not met him, I wouldn't have known that it existed. So I knew this English speaking fellowship existed in Berlin. So that was it. I went, and I knew, I could feel my brain switching, and I knew if I didn't seek help immediately, that I'd snap back.
Too easy.
So it was very clear that I needed to take immediate action. I don't know if you've experienced, or like people listening have experienced, you have that moment of clarity, like, I need help, I need to do something. But if you don't do it, like the next day you're like, oh, actually I'm fine. And it's so easy for the brain to just kind of snap back. And default to, oh, it's good enough, I'm doing okay, I don't need to get help, I'm doing all right. And I knew that would have happened.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so for Americans, fellowship is probably the same as like a meeting, like a 12-step group type thing.
Yeah.
Is it the same? Is that what you went to, was the 12-step? Okay. Yeah. So I have so many questions, so super curious, because it wasn't like you were just sort of dabbling with alcohol and drugs here and there. I mean, that was your life for a long time. And to decide that you were done with it, it must have been really difficult physically, I mean, as well as mentally, right? So what did you do in order to overcome, the urges and the cravings and physical withdrawal?
I remember someone saying to me at the time, this is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. And it really was. And I don't think there's many things in life that would be harder than that was. I often, sorry, I get a very dry mouth.
It's okay. I'll do the same.
I often use the word excruciating. It felt like I'd been physically turned inside out. It felt like my brain was being turned inside. That's how it felt. It was excruciating. I felt like every nerve was just raw. It's so hard to put words on it. It's so hard to put words on it. But what it looked like to the outside was relentlessly crying. So I didn't cry. I learned not to cry as a child. And I don't think I cried much. I was raging. I'd smash things, I'd smash furniture, all the self-harming. It was very violent and very destructive, and there weren't a lot of tears.
Because you weren't allowed.
Yeah, I learned as a child that it wouldn't have made any difference. Something on an unconscious level decided that crying wasn't acceptable, crying wasn't safe, and crying was too vulnerable. And it just went into anger. It was just anger. That's all it that was all that was there. So when I stopped using, all that, what was underneath that anger started to come up. So
Grief.
every single every single feeling, every single emotion that I had drunk away, that I had self-harmed my way through, came rushing to the surface. And somebody asked me my name in my first meeting, and I burst into tears, and I cried for 2 years. Like 2 years. It was a bit of a joke in the end, like, oh, she's crying again. Just affectionately with me and my friends. But I was just, it wouldn't stop. It was just, it felt emptiness. It felt, and it didn't feel rational. It didn't feel explainable. I was just crying. And people would, try and ask me, I don't know. It was just everything. Yeah. So very, very raw for a very long time into early recovery.
What helped you continue to push through? Because that wasn't comfortable to feel all the feels, to cry all the time, to feel depressed and sad and grieve. What was that motivation to keep going and not go back?
I believe somewhere within me, what the desire to get well and the desire for things different outweighed the desire to stay the same. Even like by like this much sometimes. I was desperate. I was absolutely desperate to get well. And somewhere in me believed that that was possible, even though it didn't always feel, it wasn't always kind of alive in me. But something in me, there was like a very tiny, indiscernible light. And I just held on to that.
Was there, if you can think back now, because sometimes just one little phrase, right, that we go back to, which often is really a belief that we choose to believe in. Was it simply, I have to keep going? Was it simply, I know I can get better? Do you remember what it was for you?
Probably lots of little phrases. There's lots of little things they say in the rooms anyway in recovery. And one of the things that I used to grasp onto was don't quit before the miracle happens.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
It's a miracle. Like I'm just waiting for the miracle.
Yeah.
Um, and it came eventually, but it took a bloody long time.
Yes. So
But
you said it took like almost 10 years for you to find breath work. So tell us about that. How did that come about?
um, so again, like it's so many little pieces of synchronicity. So one of my sponsors um, started um, getting into breathwork and offering breathwork in the States. So she
Mm,
was in the States, went back to the States. But at the time, I didn't have a lot of money and I couldn't afford her sessions. So that's how it came on my radar. So somebody that I had that had helped me a lot had found this other thing that she was saying was amazing, but I couldn't afford it. I wasn't
mm,
in a position to afford it at the time. So I just waited and I was open and I waited. And then I attended a women's circle in 2019, very, very locally. And the lady who ran it just incidentally said, "Oh, I'm a breathwork facilitator." Well,
oh.
and I just knew, I just knew it was the same breathwork as as this other person because there's so many different types, but I knew it was the same one. So I booked a session with her,
Mm,
and like I said, it blew me open. It was the most it was the most phenomenal, the most incredible experience like
mm,
ever I've ever had. It was the first time sober that I had experienced a true reprieve from my noisy, noisy mind.
mm.
And that was just exquisite. That was like, I just, yeah, because my head had been so dark for, well, the best part of 4 decades. So to have this, yeah, with the breath, with this thing that we do
All the time.
automatically,
Hmm.
and just blew me away. So it was the quieting of my mind. It was the sense of just
Mm,
pure love within me that was it was like this palpable physiological sense of love that was just coming from within me and like just wanting to share it with everybody and like seeing all the people I love in my mind and just wanting to give them more love. It was and also just crying and releasing whatever needed to kind of come out at the time. It was yeah, it was incredible.
oh, can I pause you
And I think yeah, that
before
one
bef
experience I love.
before we keep going? So love is such a it's a biggie, right? And more recently, I have sort of think of it as a verb, right? To love is to do something for people you love that might, can look in all sorts of ways. But especially as a parent, you love your kids sometimes by doing things that you don't want to do or they don't want you to do. You might it might look more like a sacrifice, right? Is to love, especially coming from my background, the Asian cultures. Love can look very different from Western cultures. So, but love is not just that, right? Love is not just a verb. Love can be anything, really. So when you just said that you felt love, please share with us what that feels like if you can describe, because I know it's a sensory thing, right? And the way I feel love might be different from yours, but just to give our community something that they might not have even thought about as feeling like love, or maybe it's something they've never really paid attention to before. So give us a sort of an explanation of what that feels like.
Oh, that's such a wonderful question, but so challenging to
So
find the
challenging.
way. Um, so what's coming up is firstly what the absence of love felt like.
Uh-huh.
So the absence of love felt so dark and so heavy and so judgy, so judgy,
Mm.
so critical of myself and of others. So I was locked, I felt locked in my head with just yeah, judgment and criticism and loathing and how suffocating and how just dark that felt.
Mm.
And I remember saying to a sponsor quite early on, I don't think I'm capable of love, because I was
Mm.
so locked in that space. And him saying, you know, trying to reassure me that I was. And I was like, no, it's not accessible to me, because I don't know if I'd ever truly felt what I have now learned to feel. And so love is the opposite of that.
Mm.
It's wildly expansive, like
Mm.
wildly expansive. And it's lightness, and it's
Mm.
pure, and it's deeply connecting. It's like all those walls, all that armor, just gone.
Mm. Yeah.
It's like pure sunshine. It's joy. It's just sheer joy, and awe, and a quiet mind,
Mm.
like silent. um,
Is this partly why
yeah,
you're such a colorful person, or that you surround yourself, or you share the sunshine with us? If if you're listening to this podcast and you cannot experience what we get to see, you have to go to the YouTube and see Olivia and her surroundings. And truly, since I met you, anything that's bright and yellow, immediately I think of you now. So you're always with me now. And that's like a such a gift that you know that you do give everybody that you touch. Um, so my question was, is that part of what you're getting to share with people now, is what you feel inside is actually exhibiting on the outside?
I think so. I think that is what, yeah, like what people say to me.
Mm.
Um, I believe that is possibly connected to how a lot of people say they feel around me, because,
Mm.
like I said, just try to describe this, the walls and the fear just dissolved, and I can just see others for their light as well, and I couldn't, that wasn't accessible to me before.
Mm.
um so I don't see people's problems, and, well, I can't, you know, I do, but it's, I can see deeper than that. I can see beyond their problems and their trauma,
Mm.
and I think, I don't know whether they can see that reflected back. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if that makes sense. But I've always been in love with color, like
Mm.
very much so. I've always loved color from being tiny. So I was all that, you know, kind of this colorful, loud excitable little girl as well. And I just think, life and trauma and all the things just layered on top of that. And my healing has been about stripping back those layers and just being, yeah, who I was supposed to be and who I am underneath. And it just feels, color is me. Like people say, oh, you're really brave for wearing color, which I just think it confuses me because I don't think it's brave. It's just, it's part of me. It's what I'm drawn to. And if I wear black, I feel, I don't feel good if I wear black.
Yeah. Yeah. It's part of your identity that
Yeah.
you're allowing to come out. Or maybe not even not an intentional thing. It's just, you're just like, this is who I am. Yeah. I love that. Do you mind telling us how old you are?
I am 43, so I'll be
Mhm.
44 in June.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have entered this, what I call the second spring, this next chapter, like midlife arena at all?
I would probably say very much so. Yeah,
Tell us more. What
it's, and I guess my hesitancy is because there's part of me that still feels incredibly young,
mm-hmm,
like incredibly young. Um, this is my kind of second life in two contexts, really, and in terms of my age, but also because of my history with addiction and my
mm-hmm,
sobriety journey. It's like my second um word, second go at life.
mm-hmm,
So in that respect, so I'll be 15 years sober in July, which feels like an impossibly amazingly long amount of time.
mm-hmm,
But also that's almost where my life started.
mm-hmm,
So it's almost like my life didn't really start until I was 30. So that's, I think I feel really young in that context.
mm-hmm,
Um, but then firstly, paradoxically, I also feel very much my age and actually really just boundlessly grateful for reaching this age and for all the learning, all the
mm-hmm,
experiential learning that I've had a chance to do. Living through that darkness and then living through this light as well. Um, I feel like I've had two lives. I really do feel like I've had two lives. Um, but yeah, just feeling really appreciative of everything I've learned, particularly in the last few years.
mm-hmm.
Mm.
Well, so I am privileged to know a little bit more about you and what you're currently going through as a 44-year-old, and that is you are a full-time caretaker of your older mother. And that alone is, one of those things that if we're lucky to live long enough to get to care for our older parents, that's a reality. That's a challenging one for everybody. So I am not quite there yet, thankfully, but you've been deep in it. So what has that been like for you? You have a full life outside of being a caretaker as well, but it's got to be um, quite a challenge in itself.
Yeah. So my mom has a progressive neurodegenerative illness called PSP, which stands for progressive supranuclear palsy. Essentially, it means that she has lost all of her capacities. So she is now bedbound, probably weighs about 5 stone. So she's like this tiny little fragile bird. She barely opens her eyes. She can't really move on her own. She has her food pureed and syringed into her mouth. So her swallowing will be the last thing, I think, that goes. She can't speak. She can't even really communicate anymore. Up until a few months ago, she could raise a thumb for a yes, but she can't do that anymore. And I live with her. I live with Mum and her living carer. It has been quite a journey, and it's all happened relatively quickly. So she was diagnosed in 2019. The progression was fairly rapid at the beginning, and it overlapped with COVID. So it overlapped with the beginning of COVID. So those first 5 months of COVID, it was just me and Mum. She was what they call furniture walking at that point. So she was still hobbling around, using furniture to support herself. But high risk of fall. She started falling quite a lot. I was, feeding her, not physically, but, cooking for her, making sure she was eating properly, making sure she was washed, all those things, practical things. And it was really, really, really hard. Not only was it hard in itself, but it was hard because COVID. And I was on my own. There was no one to help. My father and sister don't live locally. And back then, all the travel things. And so that was an incredibly, incredibly difficult time. Added, an additional layer was we'd always had a very, very difficult relationship. So a lot of my issues and problems stemmed from the relationship with my mother. So there I was in this caretaking role of a woman who had not treated me very nicely for most of my life. But through breathwork, I came to a very clear decision that it was a choice and it was something I wanted to do. I could have left. I could have left. I knew I was in choice. I knew I could have left. But I chose to stay, and I chose to be here for her, and I chose to do this. And so because I chose it, didn't take away the challenge, but it helped contain that challenge within a kind of container of peace and acceptance. And over time, and as we've got more support in, it sounds strange maybe, and to other people who've not had this experience, it's been profoundly healing for both of us. And so, I kind of wouldn't have had it any other way. There has been so much gold in the challenge. There's been so much beauty, so much tenderness, so much compassion, so much connection, so much gentleness, and none of that existed between us before. None of that existed between us. And while she was still able to speak, because of the degeneration, the atrophy in certain parts of her brain, she became a lot softer.
Mm.
So having kind of grown up and, into my 30s with this very, very, very angry mother and angry, vitriolic, unpredictable, suddenly she was softer and more gentle and quieter, and it allowed us both to see each other in a different way, beneath all those layers of armor and fear and walls of protection and judgment and all the things that had, permeated our relationship. And so for me, what other people often label as overwhelming or terrible or, heartbreaking, or, all these words other people tend to throw at me. Oh, it must be this, it must be that. And I just think, is it? That's not my experience. And it's like I say, it's not been without challenge at all. And I had my journey to reach this place of acceptance, for sure. Acceptance, I don't think, well, for me, never comes instantaneously. I have my journey to get to acceptance. But in a kind of weird way, it's been a beautiful, beautiful gift. And sometimes I do reflect and I wonder whether I'd be exactly where I am now had she not got.
What just
So yeah,
came up?
profoundly healing experience.
Yeah. So what just came up for me, and I guess I have this tendency to find parallels or synchronicities, is that the way that you chose to become sober is not indifferent from the way you chose to become her caretaker, knowing full well how difficult the path will be, right? And if you hadn't done the sober thing, you would probably not be able to be the caretaker with the compassion and the love that you have, because you got to experience the challenge of this really difficult decision that you chose to do anyway, right? And experienced the miracle that happened. And so going forward, anything that is challenging, you're willing to go through when it's your own decision, right? Because I wonder if somebody told you to do it, maybe it would not have been the same as you intentionally choosing to do it yourself. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If someone tells me to do something, I generally don't respond well.
Yeah, I think that's true for a
Yeah.
lot of us, right? When it's our
Yeah.
own decision, we own it and we're willing to take it on.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its bumps, and there was still anger there at the beginning, like why am I doing this, and why am I doing this for a woman who was so horrible to me, and all of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always I am a bit of a broken record about breath work, but I don't think I could have done it without what breath work has done for me. And she used to say to me after I started doing it, she's like, "You're nicer since you've been doing breath work." Yeah.
So I don't know very much about breath work outside of the fact that I know breathing is probably the answer to everything, since without it, we wouldn't be alive today. So when you say breath work or your version of breath
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
share a little bit about what that looks like, how, what kind of training or what do you teach your clients when you do work with somebody?
So I trained with David Elliott and Erin Telford, who are in America. Did it on Zoom. David Elliott has been doing this particular pattern of breathing for, I mean, it must be 30, 35 years now. So he's like a seasoned healer. And that's where, yeah, that's where I learned it from. It's a pranayamic breath. So I only work with one pattern of breath personally. Some call it transformational breath work. It's quite similar, to my understanding, to holotropic breath work. It essentially takes us into a non-ordinary state of consciousness. So a lot of people say it's quite similar to the journey that we can take if taking psychedelic drugs. And as somebody who is sober, I'm not interested in taking psychedelic drugs or plant medicines at all. I know it's quite big in the healing world right now, but it's of no interest to me. So the fact that we can go to those places with our breath, like, blows my mind. As I keep saying, they're so hard to put other words on it. It blows my mind, and it blows my mind every time for myself and when I witness what happens with my clients. It's phenomenal. And so it's a 2-part breath that I use. It's done lying down, so you are supported by the ground beneath. So it's the first breath is through the belly, the second breath is through the heart, and then it's a release. And they say we hold a lot of emotions in our belly, so we're really breathing into that space, deeply into that space, and then cleansing that breath through the heart and release. And there's all sorts of science out there, and all sorts of nervous system languaging around it. I think it's magic. I just think it's something happens that is, I think it's something to do with, again, this is slightly scientific language, but we spend so much time in our left brain and the thinking and the rational and the logical and the planning, and then the right brain is all dreamy and ambiguous and creative and intuitive. And what the breathing practice does is kind of quiet the left brain. It quiets all that thinking, all that mind chatter, to make space for the intuitive part of us to get louder. So there's that piece to it. And then another very big piece to it is when we essentially drop out of that thinking mind and that protective, fear-driven inner dialogue, is that it creates a space for the emotional material that we've often pushed down as a coping strategy to start to come up and be released. And when we can start to experience and feel and release and reintegrate all of that stuff that we've kind of shoved down, what happens is we come out the other side feeling lighter, freer, less anxious, less stressed, less depressed, all of those things. But until we go through that, experiencing all the things that we've not wanted to experience or feel, it's very hard to pass through to the other side. So I always say I had depression for 25 years. And I'm not a depressed person anymore. I thought being depressed was who I was. I thought it was part of my identity. I thought it was fixed. I thought it was something I would always struggle with. And it's gone. And that's not to say, I always kind of clarify, I haven't healed from being human. I haven't healed from having experiencing all the emotions. I can still feel angry, I can still feel sad, I can still feel frustrated. I love to cry. I love to, allow myself to feel whatever it is I'm feeling. The full array of human emotion. I still experience all of that. But the way I meet it, the way I hold it, the way I deal with it is just drastically different.
Yeah, what the images just came to me, and this happens for me and my clients as well when I do the therapeutic hypnosis that I offer in certain sessions. And what it the image is of, if at one point we were stuck in a room or a trap, like we were trapped, and everything just felt so dark. It's like a room without windows or doors, and thinking that that's all we have, you know. And with this work, when we shut down the left brain and let the right brain be open, be available, it's as if, I mean, that lifts, right? There's no more room or trap. And what we discovered is that we've actually been cornering ourselves in this this area without knowing that it's open. Like that, we can walk outside, there are no walls actually, that the walls were almost um constructed by the left brain maybe, but a lot of it, especially if it started early on in childhood, those walls were created for as safety, right? And we stay there because it feels safe there, this little corner. And the longer we stay there, the longer we forget that it's not a trap at all. So the work that you do, some things that I do allows for people to see that really, and to let go of the safety mechanism that was not safe, really. It was safe then, right? It kept us alive. I mean, clearly you're here. But to stay there in that corner is not going to make us have a, a good life, a carefree life, a healthy life. So I love that. I love that there are many options for us to get there, right? To come out of that corner, or to lift the trap that kept us safe-ish, but not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like that all just resonates so much. And yeah, we would rather, as human beings, typically rather stay in our familiar pain because it's familiar.
Yes.
Step out into the light because the light is unknown. And it's
Mm,
just, yeah, curious, fascinating phenomenon of being human. And that we
mhm.
just, yeah, the known is safe, even if the known is awful. And yeah, I think a lot of my I guess kind of what I'm really passionate about sharing with people is that there is another way,
Mhm.
and it might not feel like it, but that we like you say, we're confined by the wall, by our own walls, and we can't see beyond that. It's hard to, I don't think it's very, can't imagine what we've not experienced.
Mhm.
And I could never, when I was in my whole recovery journey, it was very hard to imagine a place I wanted to get to when I've never actually experienced that. Um, so yeah, I guess my, yeah, hope and intention is sharing that there's a possibility of an experience of a life that isn't dark and full of anxiety and depression and overwhelm. There is a different way of being, even if we can't see it right
Yeah.
now.
And for you to have gone through that yourself, and to be able to share with people who, may be experiencing similar things or maybe a different life circumstances, but the feelings are the same, right? That scare, the fear, being trapped. We're all humans. We have similar feelings that we experience. So yeah, you get to be, you get to show them what's possible. You get to be their guide. Um, and so as far as working with you, do you do most of them in person? Do you do some virtual sessions when it comes to breath work?
Yes, I do both. So I do one-to-one work and also group work.
Mhm.
I do one-off sessions, and then I also currently do 6-week courses. Yeah, all in person and online.
Yeah.
So I have, yeah.
What about, I know you have something else that you offer that has to do with it's almost like a book club sort of thing. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's the book club is called the Soul Library, and it is essentially like it's not I have one that is open to all genders. So it's not just a women's circle. So I have one that is all genders, and then the others are women's circles. So I say it's circle magic meets book club. So
Mm.
it's more of a circle. So you've got circle dynamics, the sharing, the space for everyone's voices, with some very gentle guidelines and boundaries so that everyone can feel as safe as possible. My intention is always to create a space that feels as free from judgment as possible, so it feels safe to our systems. And so that's the context. And then the themes and what we discuss are the books that we read. So we read books that fall under spiritual, self-development, self-healing genre, um, and read approximately a chapter a week, and then come together and share about our experience of the reading, what inspires us, how it applies to our lives, what we're learning, what we like, what we don't like about it. And it's very much sharing from a place of, and it's one of my favorite things that I've created. So I have 4 groups, 4 weekly groups, and I love it.
I love that. Well, I will share all the places where people can find you. But if there's anything in particular you want to end our conversation with so that people are curious if they want to work with you, anything you want to tell them?
I do have an online 6-week breathwork course coming up in April. That's filling up really beautifully with, I know some of the people and they're incredible. So I'm so excited. It's the first time I've offered the 6-week bubble online. So yeah, that starts in April, and it is accessible for people in the US if they are work flexible. It's afternoon time in the US. Um, and yeah, just love to have anyone there who is feeling the call, and feel free to message me with any questions.
Yeah.
Um, any questions, or I'm here. Yeah, just happy to hear from people. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, sharing your stories. I personally am looking forward to connecting back with you in person at some point, hopefully back in England, since I love your country so much. Um, and I'm just so lucky to know you and to have you in my circle. I was, I think, telling you earlier that just seeing you and your colors and the life that you've created brings joy. So thank you for that.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Kit. It's been
Oh,
so gorgeous, and I love speaking with you. And yeah, it's such an honor to know you. And thank you for asking me to be here.
no, more to come.